Schoor, could you state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Eric Schoor, Schoor.
And how old are you?
I'm 17.
What grade are you in?
I'm a senior, 12th grade.
And what school do you currently attend?
Tremper High School in Kenosha.
Call what elementary school you went to?
Yes, I do. Southport Elementary in Kenosha as well.
Did you go to school with a David Jensen?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall what grades, if any, you and David Jensen were in the same class?
3rd grade for sure, but I'm not sure about kindergarten through 2nd grade. It's possible.
Were you friends with David Jensen?
Yes, I was.
You in 3rd grade, beginning in in 3rd grade in the fall of 1998?
Fazio.
How often in the fall of 1998 would you see
and then sometimes so probably three times a week outside of school.
Okay. When you say you had an every other week schedule, what do you refer to? Every at what time approximately would you get to his house? When?
Around then, so after school.
Okay.
We were picked up by one of
you
inside. We'd watch TV or play back. So.
Okay. And how many hours would you spend at the Jensen those days when you?
About 3 hours or so. A little before 7-ish, probably.
Did you know Jensen?
Yes, I did.
And was she present during the time that you were playing with David?
Yes, she was.
And can you describe Mrs. Jensen?
Well, she was really nice, very caring. She would kind of take care of us. I mean, if she would make us popcorn. I guess that's kind of a small thing, but she was caring.
And on the Wednesdays that you weren't at David's house, would he come to your house?
Yes.
On a regular basis during the fall of 1998?
Yes.
Would he also stay at your house about 3 hours or so?
Probably. I'm not real sure on that, but I think that's probably right.
Okay. And do you remember whether his mom would pick him up?
I can't remember for sure, no.
Okay. We're at the Jensen fall of 1998. Do you remember what Mrs. Jensen while you and David were playing?
She was either outside with us sometimes. It was nice enough out to be at. Or like I said, she'd make food or something, or she'd be around the house.
Did you ever see Mrs. Jensen sitting in front of the computer that was inside the Jensen home?
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Jensen at the house? Would you see Mr. Jensen sitting in front of the computer?
Very few times. There was 1 or 2 times I actually saw him there.
Okay. In December of 1998, did you have a conversation with David Jensen regarding his mother's health?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall approximately when that conversation?
Of Julie's death. I think it was before she died.
Okay. If you knew that Mrs. Jensen died on December 3rd, 1998, in the afternoon, put that into context to when you had this conversation with David?
I would think it would probably be the day before at school, but I'm not exactly sure. It could have been after school or at some other point.
And what was David's demeanor as he talked to you about his mother's health?
Well, he was extremely concerned, and I could tell he was worried. And he was usually a pretty happy kind of person, and it was kind of a sudden shift in his attitude.
And can you tell us what David told you about his mother's health?
The objection is sustained.
Your Honor, can I be heard on that?
Let's take a little break. Please don't talk about the case during the break.
Please all rise.
I told you.
Ms. Gabrielle.
Your Honor, I think based on the testimony that's been presented by this witness, this statement is, one, a statement of recent perception. Also,
Well, I'm not so concerned about hearsay exceptions as I am confrontation.
well, David Jensen's available for cross-examination.
What about that?
I don't see him here in this courtroom. I mean, I don't know what that means. Confrontation doesn't mean I call witnesses. Confrontation means they call a witness and I get to
Make
ask
them
personal
available
questions.
for cross-examination.
Well, Your Honor, I can indicate to you that we have an agreement with defense counsel with respect to David Jensen, that since he's residing in the defendant's home, that when we wanted him, we were to give him notice and he's to make him available within 48 hours of us requesting his presence. So there's no question that David Jensen is available for cross-examination.
Well, he's available for examination.
For examination or cross-examination?
Well, I don't know. What does the statute, what does the rule say?
On confrontation?
I don't know if the rule is so particular as to on confrontation as it is on hearsay. The confrontation rule means the accused has the right to face his accuser. I'm not sure that necessarily means on cross-examination, merely has the right to examine the witness, or the declarant, rather.
Well, my objection is both on hearsay and confrontation grounds. And as to the confrontation question that the court just asked, I don't believe there's any obligation on the defendant to subpoena witnesses or bring them in or go to the expense of bringing them in.
Is the witness available, though?
I believe that they have to have that person testifying and set up because if I call them, then I'm on direct examination. That's just one of the problems. But they can't get in hearsay or avoid the confrontation issue by just saying, well, you have the same right as we do to call him. I mean, I think that would wreak havoc throughout our criminal justice system if all these witnesses just repeated hearsay and said, well, go find that witness if you want to have the opportunity to cross-examine. And second, I don't think there is any hearsay exception, Your Honor. He's not about to talk about David Jensen. I presume he's not going to say David Jensen was talking about his own mental, emotional, or physical condition. He's going to be about somebody else's condition, and so it's a statement of memory or belief, and therefore not admissible under 90803 sub 3.
Well, I think it also qualifies as an excited utterance based on the description that Mr. Schoor gave as to the change in David's demeanor when he began to talk about his mother's deteriorating health.
There's no indication that he's excited, and it's not an exception that allows everything from an
Incitement appears actually, well, I take it back. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I don't think there is any excitement, and it's not a being unhappy or being exception. It requires something much more that doesn't allow somebody to sort of misread their utterance at that moment to only say something in the and there's any case.
Subsection 3, a statement of the declarant's then existing emotion, mental feeling. Mr. Schoor has testified that the declarant was concerned about his mother's health. That strikes me as being a declaration of his own mental state at the moment
Well,
the declaration is made.
the court may recall, because we went through this
Yes, we did.
to some degree back in 2004, but in just looking at Judge Fine's evidence treatise, he points out the example of John said I'm scared is acceptable. John said I'm scared because Bill is after me is not the exception. Here, it might say David said he was worried because his mom was sick in bed is not admissible.
And I Judge Fine's example, as typically is the case, is an excellent one, but this case is a little bit more refined than that, I think, or a little different anyway, in the sense that when John says I'm afraid because whatever the names are, he's citing an historical fact in his declaration. Here, the declarant is saying, I'm worried because my mom is having trouble breathing. It's true, it's an historical fact, but it's has more of a current aspect than yesterday John hit me. He's talking about what's going on right then and there.
Well, it's not. It's something in the past. I'll admit.
In his own mind, it's happening right now. My mother's sick right now.
If he came out of the bedroom and said it, I think maybe I'd agree with the court. But he's saying something that happened before he went to school on some particular day, as late as after school that day, or sometime later in the day. So he'd be guessing as to what's going on at that particular moment.
But to see the fact that he's guessing or not is not the issue, and what makes the statement receivable is not the historical nature of it, but rather the immediate concern of the individual.
Well, but I beg to differ, just because he's giving a statement of memory. That's what makes it inadmissible, is it's a statement of memory or belief based on something he saw at an earlier time. And I also would say, in terms of the confrontation issue, I think it's a very strong issue that the state has an obligation to produce the witness.
Let's get off the confrontation for a minute. We'll come back to it. I don't agree with you, because you see the excitement or the stress to the declarant in this case isn't based upon historical illness by mother. It's based on current illness by mother. So it is, in fact, reciting something that is of immediate concern. It's not the same as saying, I'm upset because my mother was sick yesterday, or even that I'm upset because my mother was ill this morning.
That's what it is.
Upset because I'm afraid my mother is sick right now.
But it's based entirely on a memory of her being sick in the morning.
That's the way people think.
Well,
Plus, we're talking about
hearsay.
Well, there is some latitude that's given for the spontaneous declarations made by children. And one 8-year-old to his best friend is given a little bit more latitude. There's a greater indicia of reliability when an 8-year-old says it, as opposed to a 37-year-old adult who understands a little bit more the ramifications of what they're saying.
I don't think any of the latitudes based on a greater indicia of reliability, but
That's the case in all sexual assault cases, where the spontaneous declarations of children, of child sexual assault victims, are given greater consideration in terms of the hearsay rules.
but not because of greater indicia of reliability. It remains the confrontation issue regardless, Judge.
Well, I think that if Mr. Understanding between you gentlemen that who is residing with the accused will be produced for examination upon request of either party, it strikes me, that could be overcome even if the court would be concerned about it by allowing you a cross-examination. And in fact, the statutes, for example, on the use of these videotapes in child sexual assault cases explicitly provide for the defense to conduct a cross-examination whether or not the state has a direct. So
I think in those cases, the state has to produce. And
he's saying he'll produce. He'll tell you, I want the witness brought up here.
and he has to call that witness.
No.
Well,
Yes.
I'm not going to get hung up on confrontation if the witness is available, because if necessary, if the state. I don't know. I guess I would have to look at the issue of what is
Judge, they just,
right of confrontation. What?
they don't want to produce, it's obvious, they don't want to produce the witness.
Of course,
And-
it's obvious.
But I have the confrontation right on Mr. Jensen's behalf, the Sixth Amendment right to confront him. I also would note that it's not just a Crawford confrontation right, but it's a Roberts confrontation right that our Wisconsin Supreme Court still recognizes, because this is not a firmly rooted hearsay exception.
Which one isn't?
The
Cited
present
utterance?
sense impression.
No, I don't want to talk about present sense impression. I'm talking about excited utterance.
Oh, well, I didn't hear any evidence that he was excited, so I thought the court was on sub 3.
A statement of, I am, sub 3, then existing, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You're right, I'm sorry. You're telling me sub 3 is not a well-recognized exception to the hearsay rule?
It's recognized by only a very few states, I believe, is what the
Are you sure you're
Wisconsin-
not talking about 908.045, statement of recent perception, subsection 2, as opposed to subsection 3? Let's see what Judge Fine says. Because I think
Court may have a point.
this is a well-recognized exception to the hearsay rule.
No, the court may be correct, but I would say it's not firmly rooted when it's expanded beyond the simple, I'm scared, I'm worried, I'm concerned. I don't think to expand it is
Well, I'm
rooted aspect.
not going to accept your predicate because, well, here, there is a difference between your asking about whether the child was upset because his mother was sick this morning and Dad didn't take her to the doctor, as opposed to, I'm worried because I think my mother is sick and she needs medical attention and she's not getting it. Now, I understand that's not the way the declaration is to have taken place, but the point is that that's how we have to be very careful about receiving historical facts, but you can parse this too carefully too. What was the conversation?
I mean, what did he say?
What did he say?
He said, my mother is sick and my dad will not take her to the hospital.
especially the second part.
No, he's talking about his then existing fear that father is not taking her to the hospital.
I do not think that's a hearsay exception if you phrase it in those terms of what you think is going on right now when it's based on a past event. That is definitely based on past.
People think that way. We can't get away from how people think. People base their thought processes on what they have seen in the past. Now, they may not be able to report what they have seen in the past, but what the rule recognizes is that people are not likely, and especially in this instance, an 8-year-old is not likely to phoning up a statement to his friend saying, I'm worried because my mother is having trouble breathing and my dad isn't taking her to the doctor. That's a statement of his then, and it's not, we don't divide these according to some way that lawyers look at them, and we look at the basic reason for the rule, and it is based upon the reliability of statements, and this statement being made by an 8-year-old to a friend for no purpose of a self-serving nature, and not as trading common gossip out on the street, but as saying, this is why I'm worried at this moment in time. That's a highly reliable statement.
I'll tell the court why I think it is not. In fact, I think this is really the kind of dangers created by hearsay that the hearsay rules are designed to prevent. A child's, because what is David Jensen's viewpoint as related here regarding the ambulance, the hospital, based on? Why does he have that perception? Those are the kinds of things that cross-examination would explore and demonstrate. Why does he? What is he thinking that on? Is it just stuff he saw around the house and he doesn't have a very good foundation for that belief? Did his father directly tell him that? All sorts of possibilities that could be brought out on confrontation, on cross-examination, to determine what kind of weight should be given to that sort of possible just gross speculation by the child. Because an 8-year-old may not have very good ability to perceive what is going on or what's motivating people. And we ought to be able to explore what it is that led him to those conclusions. And I can't do that with Mr. Schoor. I could only do that with David Jensen.
Want to respond?
Well, Your Honor, this is clearly, number one, this is clearly an excited utterance, and Ms. Gabrielle was right when she described the existing case law on what constitutes exciting utterances, especially when you're dealing with children. And they do look at indicia of reliability, and you've made reference to the indicia of reliability in this case. And those issues that counsel was just talking about, those are confrontation issues, and this witness is available. And by the way, Mr. Albee did not answer the question that you put to him. Would he confirm the existence of this arrangement? He will confirm that if you ask him to. I guess you've got to ask him point blank, but the fact is that we subpoenaed David Jensen. We have a subpoena. We've got service of subpoena on him. As a matter of courtesy to the family, and because we view David...
I could just shorten...
Wait a minute.
Well, he says he's going to shorten it, and those are the magic words.
Okay.
Of course, I didn't dispute Mr. Jambo. I didn't know I had to confirm that. I thought it was obvious from my statement. I mean, I have that agreement. The problem is they have to exercise that agreement in order for confrontation.
Well, let's take a look at that statute to which I made reference, because...
Which one are you referring to?
That videotaping of child...
Well, of course, that really is primarily... That is not...
going to give me... He's made an assertion that statute contemplates the state actually calling the witness, which is at variance with what my recollection is. So I want to look at it.
And we had a case on that, didn't
No,
we? You and I did.
I think we just have to make the witness available.
Why don't we just look at the statute?
Okay.
And I don't recollect the numbers. Anybody remember that?
It was 978 something, I think. Let me.
979.
Is it in the criminal code or the evidence code?
It was in the trial.
It's 90808.
No, is it? It may be in, it may be in the... Yes, it is, 90808. Yeah. Subsection 5, except as provided in paragraph B, if that party does not call the child, the court, upon request by any other party, shall order that the child be produced immediately following the showing of the statement to the trier of fact for cross-examination. So I don't agree with your suggestion that the state has to actually examine the witness. It says if that party does not call the child, the court shall order that the child be made available for cross-examination. So at least, and I know that's not dispositive on what the constitutional requirement is, but it gives me a hint of what the legislature thinks, and the statute's been upheld against other constitutional attack.
I'll just tell you, I'm confident that there's a case. I'm sorry I didn't foresee this issue coming, but I've done it out.
What?
I didn't see this issue coming. I'm confident there's a case that that says that's a no-no.
You know what? I'm going to take the risk, and if I gamble and lose, I'm going to make the state do a direct examination, and that'll solve the problem. Okay? Is that understood?
Be fine with us, Judge. There's no such case that I'm aware of, and there's
I argue
ample
about
case
that,
law.
which we confrontation issue dealt with separately upon request.
Okay.
A request for cross-examination.
You have to call David.
No, all right, you're making that request, and we'll talk about it later. But the point is, you're making a request for a confrontation examination, so.
Mr. Jensen needs to.
Yeah, let's take a short break and. All right, the objection has been overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Gabrielle.
Eric, could you tell us what David told you about his mother?
Yes. He said that his mom is sick and that his dad will not take her to the hospital.
Did he describe her physical condition?
Yes, he did, with breathing.
Can you demonstrate for the jury how David demonstrated to you his mother's breathing?
Yes, it was.
Would ask that the record reflect a deep, raspy breathing.
Any objection to that characterization?
Just characterize it as deep breathing.
All right, the record will stand and the jurors heard what it was.
Did David say anything else to you regarding his mother's health?
I can't remember anything off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Did you see David again after this conversation about his mother's health?
Yes.
And when did you see him again?
I know periodically over the next couple of years I would sometimes visit their home. I think occasionally he would come over to our house, but it was a lot less time spent together outside of school.
Did you have an opportunity to go to David's house after his mother, Julie Jensen, died?
Yes.
And were you ever introduced to a woman by the name of Kelly?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall where it was that you were introduced to Kelly?
No, not off the top of my head. In their house somewhere.
In their house?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately how long after Mrs. Jensen died that you were introduced to Julie? I mean, excuse me, to Kelly?
Probably, I think it was about a month, but it could have been a little longer, a little shorter.
And who introduced you to Kelly?
Mark did.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
And how did he introduce Kelly to you?
He said, "This is Kelly, a friend from work."
And did you see Mr. Jensen and Kelly in a romantic situation?
Yes, one time I did.
And approximately when was this?
You mean how, like,
In relation to Mrs. Jensen's death?
it was soon after I had met Kelly.
Okay. And what exactly did you observe?
Mr. Jensen had his shirt off, and they were in Mr. Jensen's bedroom.
And what were they doing?
From what I can remember, they were standing there.
What time of day was this?
It was during the daytime, not at night.
Were you over at the Jensen house playing with David?
Yes, that would be why I was there.
Again, at some point between maybe 3 and 6 p.m.?
Most likely, yeah, but I can't be certain exactly.
Nothing further.
Cross-examine.
Well, Mr. Schoor, I'm going to.
Rough.
He might have just been changing his shirt.
It's possible. They were looking at each other. It seemed a little bit more. Yes.
They weren't embracing.
No. Correct.
Mr. Schoor, when's the first time that anybody from the police, Mr. District Attorney's Office asked you any questions about this case?
Mr. Jamboys had talked to me 3 or 4 years ago. It was a while ago.
Probably in about 2004,
Could have been, yeah, that sounds about right.
5 or 6 years after the events in question happened.
I think it might have been a little sooner, but not exactly sure.
Do you recall that Mr. Jamboys questioned you because there was a trial upcoming in June 2004?
No, I can't remember anything that specific.
It was a number of years after you as an 8-year-old had any of these conversations with David or experienced any of these other things though, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
It wasn't a very good one. It was a number of years before Mr. Jamboys talked to you.
After Julie's death?
Yes.
Yes.
You didn't take any notes about what happened when you were 8 years old, correct?
No, I did not.
You may have been as old as like 13 when you were first questioned about these events, correct?
Possible, but I think it was a little before 5 years after.
Well, it wasn't before Mr. Jensen was charged, right?
I would assume not.
Did you hear about when Mr. Jensen was charged?
I think, but I can't remember exactly when.
You can't even recall when you heard Mr. Jensen was charged?
As far as what year,
Right.
or no, I can remember being told, but I don't remember exactly when.
And between Mr. Jamboys talking to you about this case and the events happening, you talked to your mom about this a number of times, right?
Yes.
You heard a lot of information from other people about this case, correct?
I don't know about all other people.
About this case, right?
Yeah.
You heard people talking about this case, correct?
Yes.
Be fair to say that your memories as an 8-year-old are often influenced by what adults have told you was going on at the time?
Could be, but there are things I definitely remember from my own.
You said that you recalled, well, when did you?
I think the
following day, that Friday.
it's possible, yeah.
She died on a Thursday, December 3rd.
Okay.
You think it could have been Friday?
It could have been, yeah.
And you have heard about it on a Friday. That I remember now, 9 years.
I believe so, because I remember she died.
But he was at school on Thursday.
Depending on what time she had died.
Well, if I told you there's evidence in this case that she passed away or was found dead at about 4:30 on Thursday afternoon, and David may have told you sometime earlier on Thursday at school, correct?
It's possible, but I think I remember him telling me the day before that she had died. So Wednesday.
Or it could have been the day before you heard it, right?
I don't think so, no.
Now, your mother talked to you about this at the time, right?
Yes.
And do you recall her saying that it could have been either Wednesday or Thursday
As to what?
as to when David told you this?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Did you talk to your mother about it?
About Julie dying?
About your conversation with David?
Yes.
Your mother's here ready to testify, correct?
Yes.
If she says that it happened on Wednesday or Thursday before Mrs. Jensen died,
The conversation with David, you mean?
yes, could that have been, does that make it more apparent?
Objection, I think that.
Asking him to comment on the hearsay account.
That's fair. Did you tell your mom that it happened either Wednesday or Thursday?
I don't remember that.
Do you know what you told your mom at the time?
Yeah, what I told Angie, what David had told me, and then I demonstrated the breathing for her.
Do you know what day you told your mom it happened?
No, I can't remember that.
That is, you don't know what you told your mom in 1998 as to when you had that conversation with David, correct?
Wait a minute, I'm not sure. I understand exactly what you're asking. Are you asking on what date he had the conversation with his mother?
No, I'm asking what did you tell your mother regarding when you had the conversation with David in 1998?
Well, are we clear yet on when he had the conversation with his mother, or has that been exhausted?
You had a conversation with your mother. You had a conversation with your mother shortly after Julie Jensen died about this conversation you had with David, correct?
I believe so, but I'm not exactly sure.
And in that conversation, do you recall when you told your mother the conversation happened?
Conversation, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding what you're asking.
You talked to your mom
Correct, yes.
in 1998.
Correct,
You told her about a conversation with David.
yes.
When did you tell her the conversation with David took place?
No. What did you tell her?
What did you tell her about
As
when
to-
the conversation
yeah.
took place?
I must have told her it was either the day before, or, I mean, I must have told her that. David told me that, unless I'm still not understanding, correct?
You had the conversation with your mom, it was after Mrs. Jensen died, right?
I'm not sure. It might have, David told me before she died, so I might have told her, I might have told my mom before Mrs. Jensen had died.
And when you had that conversation with your mother, what did you tell her as to when the conversation with David took place?
I don't remember. I don't know if I told her anything.
When you went over to the Jensen house, when you'd visit back in 1998, you sometimes would play in the pool.
Correct.
You play in the pool with Mark and David.
Occasionally, yes.
Julie generally wouldn't be the one that would be in the pool with you guys,
As far as I can remember, no, she wasn't.
but you distinctly remember Mark being in the pool.
Yes.
As I understand it, you don't recall ever seeing Mrs. Jensen on the computer.
No, I do not.
You remember Mark being on the computer once or twice.
Once or twice, I remember seeing him there, yes.
Is there anything that'll help you remember, Mr. Schoor, as to when you first talked to Mr. Jamboys in this case?
I don't think so, no. I don't
Was your
remember.
mother present?
Yes, she was.
She was there when you had this conversation with Mr. Jamboys?
Yes.
And at no time prior to that had you ever spoken to a police officer or any district attorney about the case?
That's correct.
And you'd never made any notes about when conversations took place?
No, I didn't.
You never made any notes concerning what exactly was said in these conversations?
No.
Between the time of Julie Jensen's death and now, you've spoken with your mother dozens of times about this case, correct?
I'm not sure about dozens, but it's been a number of times, yes.
Testifying in this case, Mr. Schoor, on August 1st, 2007?
Yes.
Do you recall the following question? 13, page 16. Times have you spoken with your mother about this matter since December, about Julie Jensen's death since December 1998? Answer, numerous times, many times. Question, dozens. Answer, probably.
Yes, I remember that.
Would that be accurate?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Would that be accurate?
Possibly. I don't know if it was dozens. I really didn't count. It's been a good number of times, yes.
Your mother knew Julie Jensen?
Yes, she did.
She did not know Mark particularly well?
Not very well, no.
Thank you, Mr. Schoor, that's all I have.
Any regret?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down.
State of call. Laura Schoor. We're going to get to you two next.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Ms. Schoor, could you state your full name and spell the last name?
Laura Jane Schoor, S-C-H-O-O-R.
Ms. Schoor, are you the of Eric Schoor?
Yes, I am.
In 1998, at some point, did you meet Mrs. Julie Jensen?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall when you first met her?
When the boys were in kindergarten. So that would be maybe 1995.
And by the boys, who are you referring to?
Eric and David.
Eric and David? David Jensen?
Yes.
Did you become friends with Mrs. Jensen?
Yes. Yes.
Would you have contact with Mrs. Jensen?
Yes.
And starting from kindergarten, when your boys first met, how often would you have contact with Mrs. Jensen?
I would say every other week or every week, depending on the month, or it wasn't consistently every week, but average twice a month.
Okay. When your son Eric was in 3rd grade, did your contact with Mrs. Jensen become more regular?
I would say maybe a little bit more, but the boys would switch homes on Wednesdays usually. That was our routine.
And by switching homes, what do you mean?
David would come to our house or Eric would go to their house.
And whose idea was it to set up this arrangement?
I think it just kind of happened. I don't remember.
Did Mrs. Jensen have any issue with to enjoy with?
Yeah.
In the fall of 1998, how long would David be at your house?
I would say 2 or 3 hours.
And was that the same amount of time when Eric would go to David Jensen's house?
I believe so.
And did you have an opportunity in the fall of 1998 to observe Julie interacting with her son and possibly also your own son?
A little bit.
And what kind of interactions did you observe?
She would smile. She would talk with them. She was kind.
Did you have contact with Mrs. Jensen other than these play dates in the fall of 1998?
Not too much, but occasionally.
Do you know whether Mrs. Jensen was involved with the PTA at Southport School?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Were you also involved with the PTA at Southport
Yes.
School? How did Mrs. Jensen become involved in the PTA, if you recall?
I recall her calling me and asking me how she could get more involved in school. that year, and I said, oh, well, this is a good year. That when they were in third grade, the teacher likes to have volunteers. So I don't recall if that was directly the PTA or if it was, you can do that also. But I remember she was at a meeting at least once or twice, 3 times.
Okay, and this is during
That year.
September of 98
Yes.
to what, December of 98? Early December of 98?
Or November, yes.
Okay. At any point, did your son Eric talk to you about a conversation he had with David Jensen regarding Julie Jensen's health?
Yes.
And do you recall when Eric told you about this conversation between him and David?
Yes, I do.
And when do you recall Eric telling you about this conversation?
That was on Friday morning on I guess it was the 4th. It was early in the morning before school.
At this point, did you know that Mrs. Jensen had died?
No.
And what did Eric tell you about this conversation?
He said that
Stay.
The inference of fabrication.
It's not recent.
Pardon me?
No, the objection's overruled. Or, excuse me, sustained.
Did he tell you when the conversation with David had occurred?
no.
Did he demonstrate to you the way David demonstrated Mrs. breathing?
Well, that's the same objection, Your Honor.
It's a, yes, the objection.
On December 2nd, was Eric supposed to go to David Jensen's house after school?
Yes.
And those plans change?
Yes.
And how is it that the plans changed?
David called our house and talked to Eric that morning and asked if he could come to our house because his mom was sick. Eric asked me.
Who called your house, not Mrs. Jensen?
Correct.
Was that usual?
Yeah.
And this was on Wednesday, December 2nd?
Yes, in the morning before school.
Did you see Mrs. Jensen? Did Mrs. Jensen ever talk to you about getting a job?
Yes.
Do you recall when that conversation occurred?
Sometime in probably November, October, November.
And what did Mrs. Jensen tell you about this job search?
She was looking at the school system, getting a job. She was concerned about Douglas not going to daycare. It's kind of vague. I don't remember anything more.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Cross-examine.
Good afternoon. When Mrs. Jensen was talking about getting the job, did she say she was unhappy about that, happy about that? Do you recall?
I don't recall.
This statement she made about Douglas being in daycare, was it that, I didn't understand what you were saying about that.
She didn't want him to go to daycare.
And did she say she was putting him in daycare?
I don't recall.
Did she say she was unhappy about being home alone while he was in daycare? Was it along those lines?
No. I
Well-
don't understand what you mean.
Well, when you say she's unhappy about him being, she was unhappy about the prospect of him being in daycare.
Yes, she didn't want to put him in daycare.
Okay. And she say why she was going to be unhappy about that specifically?
She wanted to be home with him.
So was she unhappy about the prospect of being alone while he was at daycare? Is that something she mentioned?
No, I don't quite understand what you mean. If she was going to be at work, she didn't want him to be at daycare. She'd rather be home. That's all.
Well, did you understand that Douglas was in daycare the entire fall of 1998?
I don't recall. I don't recall that.
You weren't aware one way or another if he was in
I
daycare?
remember it's preschool possibly, but I don't.
Did she tell you that she turned down any jobs?
No, I don't remember anything.
Did she tell you anything about volunteering once at a hospital and then quitting?
Don't remember anything.
Shortly after Julie Jensen's death, you spoke with a police officer in this case.
Yes?
Is that Detective Ratsburg here?
Yes.
Do you recall telling him about the conversation that your son Eric had had with David?
Do I recall it? I don't recall specifics about the conversations.
Did you tell Detective Ratsburg that Eric had had a conversation with David?
I probably did.
Do you recall having a conversation with Detective Ratsburg about what David had told Eric regarding his mother's condition?
I probably did, but I cannot recall the standing there talking to what exactly I said. But that stuck out in my mind at the time, so.
Would it refresh your recollection to read Detective Ratsburg's police report possibly?
It might.
I'd ask you to read the last two lines on the first page and through the first full paragraph on the second page, if you would.
Okay.
Just to yourself.
Here?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Does that refresh your recollections to your conversation with Detective Ratsburg?
Yes.
And did you tell Detective Ratsburg that either on Wednesday or on Thursday, Eric had had the conversation with David about his mother's medical condition?
Statement of the facts.
Statement of what?
The facts.
Yeah, I see the document.
Well, I didn't ask you to say what was in the statement.
Well, I understand that, but I want to know about the basis thing. well,
Did you tell Detective Ratsburg that Eric had told you that on Wednesday or Thursday?
well, I guess I do want you to rephrase that again. Because I don't think it,
Do you,
try again.
did you have a conversation with Detective Ratsburg?
Yes,
In that conversation, you discussed the conversation your son Eric had told you about that he had with David, correct?
yes,
Eric and David's conversation had dealt with Mrs. Jensen's medical condition, correct?
correct.
And did you tell Detective Ratsburg that Eric learned this on the Wednesday or Thursday before Mrs. Jensen's death?
According to that, that's Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, the question is, do you recall with Detective Ratsburg?
I cannot remember standing there talking with him what I said exactly. Is that,
And-
if that's what,
Okay. Do you recall right now whether, no, let me back up. Eric first told you about any such conversation on Friday, correct?
yes,
David was at your house on Wednesday, and he did not tell you anything about his mother's
Correct.
breathing, right?
correct.
He didn't tell you anything. When Eric told you on Friday about his conversation with David, did he say that that occurred on Thursday, Wednesday, or do you not recall?
I don't recall Eric telling me when. He said, David said. That, I remember that.
Okay, and that you remember though,
Friday,
she died.
it was Friday morning that Eric said. It was very early. I don't know, he had told him the day before or something. I don't know. He didn't say when.
Okay. Did you see Jensen on Thursday?
No,
And Eric said nothing about any conversation with David on, prior to that Friday morning?
correct.
Thank you. Oh, no, I got one more thing. Do you know if Julie Jensen attended the November 1998 PTA meeting?
I don't know for sure. I remember she was there at least one or two of them, but I don't know.
You don't know what months those were?
No,
That might have been as early as September?
it could have been, but I don't know if September. That might have been too early.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Shore.
Any question?
Mrs. Schoor, Mr. Albee asked you to look at a paragraph in Detective Ratsburg's report.
Yes,
You read that?
yes.
And in that report, it says,
I think it was shown to her for the purpose of determining whether it would refresh her recollection, and she stated that it did not.
I just want some clarification about the specific line that Mr. Albee questioned her on.
He questioned her, and he may have used that in order to question her, and I suggest you do the same, but don't
Okay.
read from the document.
All right, that's fine. When you spoke with Detective Ratsburg, were you telling him Okay, as you're sitting here today, Ms. Schoor, do you remember what day it was that Eric told you about this conversation he had with David Jensen?
He told me on Friday morning, early Friday morning, that he had had this, that David told him that.
Okay.
So you can only assume it was the day before or Wednesday. That's an assumption of, if it was Wednesday or Thursday, I don't know.
Okay.
I remember asking him, but I don't remember his answer.
Okay. I have nothing further then.
Cross-examine.
No, Judge.
You may step down.